Parshas Nosoi, Tovshin Pei Beis. This week, we're now after Shavuos. Time is moving along, and this week's Parsha, Parshas Nosoi, here in Chutz La'aretz, Parshas Ba'aloischa, in Eretz Yisrael. And we're going to speak about a very important subject tonight, and that is the subject called Shalom, peace. And more than ever, it's something that we have to think about, something that we have to talk about, and something we have to really keep in mind. Why do we speak about peace this week? Why do we speak about Shalom? Not because we're interested in any of the current events, and we're looking to create peace amongst Democrats and Republicans, amongst Russians and Ukrainians, amongst the Israelis and the Arabs. That's not what the peace, that's not the subject of peace that we need to speak about. What we're looking to speak about right now is peace amongst Klal Yisrael, peace amongst ourselves. And if there is peace amongst Klal Yisrael, Chazal tell us, Mefarshim tell us, that from us it spreads to the rest of the world. So if you look around the world and you see that there's major strife, there's war, there's so much going on around the world where people are hating each other, people are killing each other, people dislike each other, just know that we have to look inward, and it means that there's not enough peace amongst ourselves. There's not enough peace and harmony amongst Klal Yisrael. And in this week's Parsha, we have the Birchas Kehanim. The last pasuk of Birchas Kehanim, as everybody knows, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yaseim lecha shalom. The final bracha, the final words in the Birchas Kehanim, v'yaseim lecha shalom. It's the biggest bracha we can ask for from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The culmination of all the brachas. Yivrechecha Hashem, Yishmerecha, Vichunecha, everything in between, but V'yaseim Lecha Shalom, that is the culmination, the peak of all the brachas. And the Medrash in Bamidbar Rabbah, Yud Aleph Zayin, the Medrash tells us just how great this bracha of Shalom really is, and how important it is to every one of us. And the Medrash tells us that it's so great that we know that every tefillah that we daven, every single tefillah ends with Shalom. Hamavarech and Samoy Yisrael B'Shalom. Every tefillah that we daven ends with a statement of Shalom, of peace. Birchas Kehanim, as we said, culminates with Shalom too. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us, Hillel Omer, Hevei mitalmidov shel Aharon. We should be, every person should strive to be. You want to know who your Rebbe should be? Your Rebbe should be Aaron HaKohen. And what did Aaron HaKohen represent? Hevei mitalmidov shel Aharon, Ohev shalom v'roidev shalom. Not only should there be peace, but you should love peace, and you should chase after peace. That is a Talmud of Aaron HaKohen, and that's something that every one of us has to strive for. And then it goes on, there's many other Mamorei Chazal that extol the virtues of Shalom. We'll see in a couple of weeks in Parshas Pinchas. Pinchas got a bracha, Hineni saying Loyas Brisi Shalom. Pinchas was due a great bracha, and what was he given? He was given Shalom. And as a matter of fact, says the Nesivos Shalom, and very befittingly, the name of the shir that we give and the name of the sefer, Nesivos Shalom. It happens to be that Nesivos Shalom was somebody who also never answered back to anybody, never got involved in any back and forth without getting into politics or anything. entire Torah is called Shalom, and we know Derechea Darchei Noyam, V'chol Nesivos Shalom. All the ways of the Torah. You want to know if you're living the life of a Torah? You want to know if you're living the life of the Torah and being a Jew of Torah? Then just know, see if you are peace, if there's peace being strived for in your life. V'chol Nesivos Shalom. Somebody who represents Torah, someone who is about Torah, represents Shalom. In Masechta Derech Eretz Zuta, there's an entire perek called Perek HaShalom. And in that perek, each and every Mishnah begins with Godol Hu HaShalom, and it gives another reason and another aspect for Shalom. And to top it all off, over there, it tells us that we need to remember that Shalom is a name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And besides being the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one of the names of the Melech HaMashiach, one of the names of Mashiach, also is going to be Shalom. The Sifri in our Parsha, in Parshas Nosai, tells us that Shalom, having peace, is equal to all of Maaseh Bereshis. As we say, S.S.S. Shalom uvareas hakol, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes peace and He created everything. And it said in the same sentence that the creation of everything is equal to Shalom. And just to touch upon Maimon Har Sinai, we're only a couple of days past Shavuos, that Perek HaShalom tells us that when Klal Yisrael stood at Har Sinai and they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them the Torah and rejoiced and gave them the bracha of Shalom also. As the Pasuk in Tehillim says, everybody's familiar with this Pasuk, Hashem oiz le'amo yitain. Hashem gave strength, Hashem gave oiz, referred to as the Torah. Hashem gave it to Klal Yisrael. And then right away, Hashem yivarech es amoi v'shalom. That the Torah came along with Shalom. They received two gifts, Torah and Shalom. So really the question is, after having said all of this, and everything that we just mentioned, and all the Mefarshim and the Mishnayos, and the Mamorei Chazal about Shalom, why is Shalom that vital? There has to be an underlying reason. Why is Shalom that important? What exactly is this Shalom, peace, that is held in such high regard? And it can't be, today, if you see two people that fight with each other, or two nations that fight with each other for 50 years, and one day they're not fighting with each other, so they abstain from killing each other, and we say that they're at peace. But that can't be the Shalom that we are referring to. We know in Kaddish, we hear many times a day, S.S.S. Shalom b'mroimav. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes peace b'mroimav. It means that Hashem keeps the peace between the Malachim Usrafim. Hashem, not only do we want peace on this world, but S.S.S. Shalom b'mroimav, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes peace and keeps the peace between Malachim and Srafim. So it can't mean that Shalom is where we abstain from fighting, because the Malachim and Srafim do not fight with each other. They don't have a Yetzer Hara for Kavod. They don't have a Yetzer Hara for Machlokes. They're not fighting with each other. So what does peace mean by HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeping peace up in the heavens? The way we think of peace is if you're not fighting, then there's peace. It can't mean that if Hashem is S.S.S. Shalom b'mroimav, He's making peace up there. It must have a much deeper meaning. So Nesivos Shalom brings an explanation from the Koznitz Magid, Zchus Yagan Aleinu, in the Sefer Avodas Yisrael on Parshas Noach. And he explains and he says like this: why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the name Shalom? Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why are one of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalom? It is because if you look at the creation of the world, everything in the world was created with very contrasting ingredients. We know the world is created with fire and water, wind and earth, things that contrast each other and technically cannot live and exist together. Nothing should last, really. If you put the fire and the water together, fire and water don't last 2 seconds together, right? And yet, Hashem created a world and an environment where all of these contrasting things, they coexist. They exist together. Not only do they exist, but they thrive. All the contrasting seasons, this summer and this winter, you put them together, you get a lot of nothing. You get one big mess. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a system in our world of seasons where they rotate, and different continents and different parts of the earth have seasons at different times of the year. The night and the day. Hashem created night, He created day, and He strongly delineated between the two to make them exist together. Night and day obviously cannot live one on top of the other. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by making Shalom amongst all these contrasts that were made in the creation, created a shleimus in the Bria. We have a completion in the Bria when there is peace amongst all the contrasting forces of creation. And it's not just to keep the peace. It's that the world actually thrives on all these stiras. What would a world be if we only had daytime all day and we didn't have the night? What would the world be with fire and not water, or vice versa? They complement. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a situation where not only do they exist together, but they complement and they supplement each other. So Shalom is equal to all of the Ma'aser Bereishis, because in order for the Ma'aser Bereishis to continue, in order for things to continue, we need that everything should be at peace. Shalom is a general midah without which the world could not exist. And that is S.S.S. Shalom Bimroimov. Every one of the malachim, they don't argue with each other. They don't have petty arguments like us human beings do. But each one has their shlichus. And sometimes it contrasts with the other one. HaKadosh Baruch Hu lets each one thrive and complete their mission that they have to do. And the Nesivos Shalom tells us that we need to understand that Klal Yisrael needs to know that Hashem created the Bria, that the peace in the world and everything continuing and everything existing peacefully is totally in us. It's totally in Klal Yisrael. That if we as Jews, and this is a tough statement, we need to look in the mirror and we need to understand that all the petty things that people that fight with each other and argue with each other, we don't have to get into the politics like we said and get into specifics, but Klal Yisrael, if we are b'shalom and we're b'achdus, we are the ones that bring the whole Bria together. Shalom amongst the Malachim and Srafim, and Shalom in the Bria is totally in Klal Yisrael. That's what Hashem looks to us. We set the tone. We set the tone of the world. And if Klal Yisrael would be at peace, and if members of Klal Yisrael would love each other the way we are supposed to, and not look at all the external, you're a little different than I'm different than you can't be in my neighborhood, my community, my school, my thing, I don't like you don't like me, then when we act like that, then you see what goes on in the world. Hashem is taking the tone from Klal Yisrael and saying, oh, listen, you can't get along, the rest of the world is not going to get along either. So it's in our hands. This week of Birkas Kahanim, we need to think before we get involved in Machlokes. We're not just causing arguments between each other. We are causing argument, we're causing strife in the whole world. Let's understand, internalize the lesson of Shalom, the lesson of peace during this week where we read about Shalom, where we read about peace. And if each and every one of us reflects and accepts on us a little bit more peace, we'll be doing a great service to the entire world.